It was snowing heavier than usual when the royal party arrived. King Robert, fat and weary, stepped down from his horse like a man already tired of life. The feast was full of laughter, meat and old stories, but Ned Stark sat quiet, the weight of the North in his eyes. When Robert finally asked him to ride south and become Hand of the King, the hall held its breath. Ned looked at Catelyn, then at the children. Bran had already climbed the broken tower earlier that day. He was still asleep, badly hurt. Something in Ned's gut twisted. He had dreamed of snow and blood for days now. Something felt wrong. He cleared his throat. "Forgive me, Your Grace," he said slowly, "but I cannot leave Winterfell. Not now. My son is broken, and the North needs its warden." Silence fell like a sword. Robert blinked. "You'd refuse your king?" "I'd not refuse a friend," Ned said. "But I fear the South holds no peace for me, and I won't leave my house vulnerable." Robert's face darkened. Cersei whispered something sharp in his ear, and her lips curled like a viper's. But Robert only sighed. "You always were a stubborn, you bastard, Ned." The next morning, the king left Winterfell angry and disappointed. Jon Snow was sent to the wall as planned, but this time, Ned hugged the boy tighter. "Write to me often," he told him, "and keep your eyes open. There are things in the dark colder than ice." When the Lannisters rode south, something shifted. Catelyn could feel it. Ravens still came from King's Landing, letters sealed in golden wax. One warned of Jon Arryn's death, another hinted he had been murdered. Then came the message from Lysa Arryn that the Queen had a hand in her husband's death. Ned paced the great hall after reading it. "They killed Jon Arryn, and Robert's blind to it," he said aloud. "To no one in particular. If I'd gone south, I'd have walked straight into a trap." Catelyn nodded grimly. "Then we must prepare. War may come sooner than we think." But they were not the only ones plotting. In King's Landing, Cersei was furious. "He dared deny the king. He dares suspect me. We should have killed him while we had the chance." Littlefinger smirked in his usual sly way. "Ah, but Lady Stark still trusts too easily. Perhaps we draw her out rather than the wolf." Meanwhile, in the north, Ned summoned his bannermen under the guise of a winter assembly. He needed to know where loyalties lay. Rose Bolton came, silent and pale-eyed. Great John Umber stomped in with a belly, full of ale and loyalty. The Karstarks rode in grim as always. They all wanted to know one thing: why was Winterfell preparing for war? Ned stood on the balcony that overlooked the courtyard, arms crossed. "If the rumors are true," he said, "then the Iron Throne is ruled by murderers, and the king's heirs may not be his own blood." Gasps rang through the hall. Men muttered. The truth was dangerous, but the North remembered, and when Ned said they would not bow to a southern lie, most nodded. What he did not know yet was that Bran had awakened, and he remembered the fall. He remembered golden hair and cold blue eyes. He remembered Jaime Lannister pushing him, and he whispered it to Maester Luwin, who almost dropped his chain. That was the moment the snow turned red, because if the Queen's brother had tried to murder a Stark, it wasn't just treason. It was... Warbran's words spread through Winterfell like wildfire. At first, Master Luwin hesitated to tell Ned, unsure if a child's broken memory could be trusted. But when he looked into Bran's eyes, hollow with fear, but steady with truth, he knew. He told Lord Stark everything that same night. Ned didn't speak for a long while after hearing it. He sat by the hearth, hand clenched tight around the wolf-head armrest, the flames flickering across his stern face. When he finally looked up, it wasn't just as a father. It was as the Warden of the North, preparing for the storm to come. "If the Queen's brother pushed my son," he said, "then they tried to silence the truth. That means Jon Arryn may have learned it too." "About the children?" Luwin asked. Ned nodded slowly. "I remember how Robert's son looked. Black, of hair, like him. But the Queen's children, they're all golden, A deep, sickening silence followed. "We have to act," Catelyn said, her voice sharp. "If they killed Jon Arryn, if they tried to kill Bran, they won't stop, not until our whole house is buried." Ned called a council of his most trusted men that night: Roderick Castle, the Great Jon, Sir Helman Tallheart. He did not speak of Bran's memory aloud, but he gave them one clear message: the North must be ready. "Send riders to the Neck. Alert Howland Reed. Tell him the South rots and we must guard the marshes. If war is coming, it may come from both land and sea." But before they could prepare much further, ravens arrived from King's Landing. Robert was dead, killed in a hunting accident, they claimed, gored by a boar. Ned crushed the letter in his hand. No accident. They killed him. Joffrey had taken the throne, and the Lannisters were now the crown's protectors. Worse still, another letter came, this time signed by Sir Jaime Lannister himself, now acting as Lord Protector while the boy king grieved. It demanded Lord Stark travel to King's Landing immediately to swear loyalty to King Joffrey or be declared a traitor. Ned stared out at the falling snow. So it's treason now to know the truth. But instead of bending the knee, Ned took a different step. He sent ravens to every great house in the realm. He wrote in his own hand, calling for an investigation into Robert's death, revealing the truth about Joffrey's parentage, and urging the lords of Westeros to stand for honor. Catelyn's voice trembled as she read the draft. "They will come for us." "Aye," Ned said. "Let them." But it wasn't only the south that stirred. Far to the east, in the Vale, Lysa Arryn had locked her doors. She would not join the fight. And across the sea, Viserys Targaryen received word of Robert's death. Udian saw his chance at reclaiming the throne. Dany was already with child. The dragons were stirring even if they didn't know it yet. Back in Winterfell, Theon Greyjoy watched all this with unease. He had grown up in the north, but his blood was salt. He wrote secret letters to Pike, whispering of the trouble in the realm. Balon Greyjoy read them with a smile. "Let the lions and wolves tear each other apart," he said. "We'll rise when they're all bleeding." Meanwhile, Ned rode to White Harbor to speak with Wyman Manderley. The Fat Lord was loyal, but cautious. "If you go to war, my lord, you'll need more than northern swords. You'll need the Riverlands, the Tullys." Catelyn had already sent word to her father, Lord Hoster, but Riverrun was sickly and tired. War weighed heavy on old bones, and yet the South made the next move before Ned could. A raven came from the wall. Benjen Stark was missing. Ranging beyond the wall, he had disappeared. And more than that, Jon Snow wrote of something darker. A rider returned dead and rose again. "It's not just politics anymore," Ned said. "Something darker stirs, and we fight among ourselves like fools." But there was no time to dwell. A force flew the Lannister banners, marching north. Henry had taken a company and headed to the Riverlands, striking fast, burning villages loyal to Tully and Stark alike. And it was Robb, not Ned, who stood up at the war table. "Then we ride south," he said, jaw clenched, "with every sword." In the north, Ned looked at his son, no longer a boy. The wolf had woken. Winterfell had never seen such movement since the days of the old kings. Blacksmiths hammered day and night. Boys too young for swords were put to training with wooden spears. Maids wept quietly for sons and fathers who would not see another. Snowfall, the banners of the north, direwolves, flayed men, white suns, flew high above the walls. War was no longer coming. It was already here. Robb Stark stood tall beside his father as the army formed. Barely 15, but he held himself like a man grown. Ned watched him with both pride and sorrow. He had wanted another life for his son, a quiet one with peace and honor. But peace was for those who looked away. The Starks were not built for that. They rode out from Winterfell with near 20,000 strong. The lords of the north answered the call, even the cold-eyed Boltons of the Dreadfoot, though Ned had his doubts about Rose. Men who smile without warmth are rarely loyal when blood starts flowing. At Moat Cailin, they paused. The gateway between north and south stood silent and crumbling, but Ned knew it well. He remembered riding through it with Robert years ago, before rebellion and crowns. He ordered scouts south and sent a raven to Riverrun. The Riverlands needed to be warned. Jaime Lannister was cutting through them, like fire through dry grass. But the south moved faster than expected. Walder Frey, true to his reputation, wavered. He promised to open the twins, but refused to commit. "Men, I am but a simple bridge lord," he wrote, "and prefer to live long enough to see my grandchildren's weddings." Ned cursed under his breath. He'd known the man was treacherous, but hoped age had softened him. It had only made him more slippery. At Riverrun, the news was grim. Catelyn's brother, Edmure, had tried to hold the fords and failed. Jaime had captured several minor lords, and Lord Hoster was barely holding the walls. Ned didn't hesitate. "We ride to Riverrun," he ordered. "The lions must be stopped here." Before they left, a second raven arrived, from King's Landing. Joffrey had declared Ned Stark a traitor. The raven named him a conspirator who sought to steal the crown. His lands were forfeit. His sons were to be captured. A bounty was placed on his head, dead or alive. Robb's hands shook as he read the letter. "They call you the traitor?" he spat. "They dare—" Ned took the letter and burned it in. The fire— "Words are wind," he said calmly. "We answer with steel." But not all in the north were silent. Rose Bolton requested a separate command. He claimed he would secure the Dreadfort and raise additional men. Ned agreed, but his eyes lingered on Rose longer than necessary. By the time they reached the Green Fork, the war had already begun. Jaime Lannister's forces were laying siege to Riverrun. Smoke curled in the distance, black against the grey sky. Ned's scouts returned with reports of scattered villages, burned fields, and broken corpses. The Lannisters weren't just fighting. They were sending a message. Robb gripped his sword, Grey Wind growling beside him. "We strike at dawn," Ned said. But that night, in a quiet corner of the camp, Catelyn arrived with more news. Her face was pale. "Sansa. She's still in King's Landing, Arya too." Ned's heart dropped. Catelyn nodded. "I told them to be careful, to stay quiet, but we both know Cersei Lannister will use them." It was a knife in the dark, not aimed at him, but at his soul. His daughters, trapped in a den of lions, used as pawns in a game of thrones. He looked at the rising moon, then at the banners flapping in the cold wind. "We take Riverrun," he said. "And then we marched to the capital." But there was another matter still. A raven had come from the wall again. Jon Snow had taken his vows, and he had seen something beyond the wall. Dead things, cold things, things that didn't stay buried. And, though it was hundreds of miles away, Ned Stark felt a chill in his bones deeper than even war could bring, because while men played their game, the true enemy marched unseen. The dawn attack on Riverrun was swift and brutal. Ned led the center. Charge, flanked by Robb and the Greatjon. The roar of thousands filled the early morning mist as Stark banners crashed into Lannister lines. The Lions hadn't expected a northern army to reach them so quickly. Their camp was caught in disarray, tents half raised, fires still burning, men dragging on their armor as northern blades tore through them. Grey Wind leapt through the chaos. Like a ghost, jaws soaked in blood, eyes wild. Robb rode like a man born for battle, cutting down knights twice his age. He did not smile. He did not boast. He fought with purpose, for Winterfell, for his sisters, for the north. Ned found Jaime Lannister near the riverside, mounted and furious. The Kingslayer fought like a demon, but even he couldn't turn the tide alone. When Ned's horse fell beneath him, Jaime charged. Their swords clashed in a flurry of sparks, ice against fire, duty against pride. Jaime laughed bitterly as they fought. "You should have stayed in your frozen castle, Stark, and you should have stayed away from my son," Ned snarled. there, blades locked, but Jaime was fast, too fast for his armor. He feinted left, then twisted, knocking Ned's sword away. The Kingslayer raised his blade to strike the killing blow, but Robb came crashing in, spear in hand. Jaime turned too late. The shaft smashed into his ribs, knocking him off his horse. The Kingslayer rolled into the dirt, dazed and groaning. By the time he reached for his sword, Grey Wind was on him, teeth bared, growling low. Robb stood over him, chest heaving. "Yield," he said. Jaime spat blood. "To a boy?" "To the north." The battle ended with River Run free. Edmure Tully opened the gates himself, tearful, his face bloodied from a wound at the brow. He embraced Ned and Robb both, then limped inside to tend to the wounded. The Riverlands were bruised but not broken. That night the banners of House Stark, Tully and their allies flew over the walls. In the great hall, Ned sat at the high table, Jaime Lannister shackled below. Robb watched him with quiet hatred, but Ned was silent. "You should kill him," the Great John said. "He tried to murder your son. He confessed nothing, but we know what he is." Ned stared at Jaime. The Kingslayer smirked, even chained. "No," Ned said. "He'll face justice, and if we execute him now, we lose our leverage." Robb's hands clenched. "Leverage?" Ned looked at his son. "Sansa, Arya, we need to bring them home. Jaime Lannister is the price." But Robb didn't like it. Not one bit. Far away, in the shadowed halls of the Red Keep, Cersei received news of her brother's capture. Her scream echoed through the tower. "They have Jaime! That northern whore's spawn has him!" Littlefinger smiled like a man watching. "Wolves dance on a trap," and Varys whispered, "Perhaps now is the time to consider alternatives." Cersei didn't sleep that night. Instead, she summoned Grand Maester Pycelle and began drafting a new decree. She would offer a trade, the Stark girls for the Kingslayer. She didn't trust Ned to accept, but she knew he would. If it came from his daughter's hands, Sansa would write the letter. Under watch, Arya, however, had already slipped into the city's underbelly, lost among rats and shadows. Cersei had no idea she was still alive, and Varys preferred to keep it that way. Back at River Run, Ned received the Raven the next morning, a letter from Sansa. Her words were trembling, afraid, lightly coached. "Father, the Queen is gracious. She wishes to return us to Winterfell. She asks only for peace and for Uncle Jaime's safe release. Please, I wish to come home." Ned read it twice, then a third time. The fire in his eyes never dimmed. "They have her," he said softly. "They have both." Catelyn reached for his hand. "We can't trust them." "We can't ignore them either," Ned replied. "Not while my blood is still in their hands." The next day, Ned summoned his war council. Edmure the Greatjon, "Lord Karstark and Robb, we march," he said. "Not to King's Landing, not yet." They looked confused. "We go to Harrenhal. It's time we showed the realm that the North isn't just resisting, it's coming for the throne." Outside the hall, Jaime Lannister sat in chains, but he was smiling, because war was easy. Family was complicated. The ruins of Harrenhal loomed ahead like a broken crown of stone, its blackened towers stabbed into the sky. No place in Westeros held more ghosts, and that was precisely why Ned Stark chose it. The castle was cursed, burned by dragonfire long ago. But its halls were strong, its walls high and its position central. From Harrenhal, they could strike east toward King's Landing, south into the Reach, or west into Lannister lands. It was more than strategy. It was a message. The Starks were no longer defending the North. They were taking the war to the heart of the realm. The march there was hard. Rain fell in sheets, turning roads into mud. Supplies ran low. Men grew restless. But Robb kept them moving. He rode alongside the bannermen, spoke with the wounded, broke bread with common soldiers. They called him the Young Wolf, and they followed him, not because he was Ned Stark's son, but because he was earning it. Ned, meanwhile, sent ravens in every direction. one to Stannis Baratheon, declaring Joffrey's illegitimacy and urging him to claim the throne. One to Renly, though he knew that vain young lion would prefer a crown of flowers to one earned in war. And more to neutral houses. Houses like Hightower, Arryn, even Martell, hoping to fracture the fragile alliance, keeping the Lannisters on their stolen throne. At Harrenhal, they found it abandoned, save for a few terrified servants and a dozen flayed corpses hanging from the gates, the work of Gregor Clegane, the Mountain. He had passed through days before, leaving horror in his wake. Women violated, children slaughtered, entire villages burned for sport. Ned clenched his jaw as they cut the bodies down. "We find the Mountain," he said, "and we put him in the ground." But they didn't find the Mountain. What they found instead was a spy, captured just outside the gates, a squire trying to flee east. They dragged him before the high table in Harrenhal's shattered hall, his face beaten, lips trembling. I serve Lord Baelish," the boy stammered. "I was sent to see what you were planning, my lord, Littlefinger." The name alone made Ned's blood run cold. The same man who once swore loyalty and tried to pit him against the Lannisters before. Now he sent spies like any other vulture in the south. Robb slammed his hand on the table. "Kill him." But Ned held up a hand. "No, we send him back." The boy's eyes widened in shock. "With a message," Ned continued. "Tell your master Harrenhal belongs to House Stark now, and if he wants to play games, let him come here. And bleed." The spy fled the next morning, still shaking. Later that night, Ned walked alone through Harrenhal's ruins, past cracked walls and melted stone. The castle reeked of old smoke and older death. He stopped at the Godswood, where a single twisted weirwood had somehow survived. Its red eyes stared back at him through the fog. He knelt, whispered, "Old gods, give me the strength to save them, and the wisdom to know what must be done." Behind him, footsteps approached. It was Catelyn. "They sent another letter," she said quietly. "From the capital. They're offering a trade. Sansa and Arya for Jaime." Ned closed his eyes. It was the one decision he couldn't make as Warden of the North, only as a father. "Robb will hate me for it," he said. "So will the lords." "And I will love you for it," she whispered. The next day, the council raged. Lord Karstark demanded Jaime's head for his sons, both killed at the Whispering Wood. The Greytron cursed the Queen's offer, but Robb remained silent. When the shouting died, Ned stood. "I will not trade my daughters like cattle, nor will I risk their lives by holding Lannister steel." He looked at Jaime, chained in the corner. "I'm sending him back." Robb stood. "Then I'm marching on King's Landing. If you won't bring them home with a sword, I will." Ned's heart broke, not from disagreement, but from knowing the boy was now a man. "There's something I haven't told you," Ned said quietly, as the others left. He opened a locked chest and took out a bundle, soft cloth, weathered, tied with leather cord. Inside was a letter, and a name. "Before your mother died, there was something else, someone else." Robb looked confused. Then Ned said it. "You have a half-brother. Jon Snow is not my bastard. He is Rhaegar Targaryen's son, and rightful heir to the Iron Throne." Robb staggered. "That's why you spared Jaime," he whispered. "You've been hiding a king all along." But there was no time to process it, because that night the ravens came again. Stannis Baratheon had declared himself king. Renly had crowned himself in Highgarden. And King's Landing had sent another message. Arya was gone, and Sansa was now a prisoner. The air in Harrenhal turned heavier with each passing hour. Arya's disappearance struck like lightning through the heart of the Stark camp. No one knew where she had gone. The Lannisters swore she vanished into the streets. Some whispered she had been killed. Others believed she escaped. But Ned knew. "His daughter better. She's alive," he said firmly to Catelyn. "If she were dead, they'd send her bones. They'd want me to see them." Catelyn only nodded, eyes rimmed red. She had no more tears to offer. War had wrung her dry. But Sansa remained in the Queen's hands, no longer treated like a guest. She was a hostage now, locked in her chambers, watched day and night. Her letters were no longer her own, her future, a coin to be bartered. Robb's fury boiled over. "She's our sister. And you send her captor back with a warning." He meant Jaime. Ned looked him in the eye. "I didn't send him with a warning. I sent him with a message. You took my daughters. I let you live. Now I'm coming for the throne." Jaime was delivered to King's Landing within the week, escorted by 100 northern riders, unchained, unharmed. Robb didn't speak to his father for days after that, but word travelled fast. The North held River Run. The North held Harrenhal, and now the Lannisters had lost their golden lion. The image was spreading across the realm. The North was not retreating. It was conquering. Still, new dangers brewed on every front. Renly's army grew fat with reach. Bannerman, 100,000 men stood behind him, guided more by roses and coin than blood or loyalty. He wore a crown forged in haste and paraded his young knight lover like a victory banner. Stannis, meanwhile, held Dragonstone in iron grip, his ships raiding coastal towns. And behind him whispered rumors of a red woman, a priestess of fire and shadows, who claimed to see the future in flames. In the north, Ned's scouts brought darker news. Roose Bolton had returned to the Dreadfort. But he wasn't raising banners. He was raising flayed corpses. Villages that refused to swear to him vanished. Captains sent to check his loyalty didn't return. Quietly, without announcement, Roose Bolton had crowned himself Warden of the North. "The leech has turned," Ned said bitterly, "and if we don't cut him out now, he'll bleed us from within." But they couldn't split their forces. Not with King's Landing still holding Sansa. Then came a rider, his horse nearly dead beneath him, clothes singed black, eyes wild. "The Wall," he gasped. "The dead. They walk. Your brother is missing." Lord Commander sent a call to all the realms. The Night's Watch begs for aid. The hall fell silent. Ned leaned forward, every muscle in his body tightening. "What do you mean, the dead walk?" "White eyes, blue skin. They rise when they fall." Robb stood up. "We need to go north," but Ned shook his head. "We can't abandon the south, not now, not with her still in their hands." The room seemed to close in around them. "We must divide," Ned said finally. "You ride north, take men you trust, root out the Boltons and ride for the Wall. The Watch needs us." "And you?" Robb asked, stunned. "I march on King's Landing," Catelyn gasped. "Alone?" "Not alone," Ned said. "With whoever still remembers the name Stark, with Tully spears, with Riverland bows, with every house that still values truth over gold. I'll bring the storm to their gates." Robb gripped his father's arm tight. "Bring her back." Ned nodded, and for a moment father and son simply stood there. No crown between them, no titles, just blood and fire and duty. 2 weeks later, Harrenhal emptied. Robb rode north with 5,000 men, hoping to put down the Bolton rebellion and reach Castle Black in time. Ned marched south, past fields burned by Lannisters, through villages that whispered his name. At the Trident, hundreds joined him, men who had followed Robert years ago and now saw honor in the eyes of a wolf. By the time he reached the King's Road, his host was 15,000 strong, and kings all. Landing began to panic. Cersei tried to rally the city, but the small folk feared another sack. The gold cloaks were restless, the small council divided, and whispers of Stannis marching from the east made her nights sleepless. Sansa stood at her window, candle flickering beside her, staring at the road. "I know he's coming," she whispered. Then, one morning the bells rang, not for death, but for war. Ned Stark had reached the gates, and with him came the Old North, colder than death, harder than steel, and more dangerous than any king. No banners flown, no negotiations, only a simple message. Nailed to the gates of the Red Keep, return the Stark girl, or burn.